Hi, I'm Will Reuter, Executive Vice President of the Home Builders Association of Greater Kansas City. With me today is George Sluiter, past president, longtime member, and codes aficionado for the Kansas City metro area. And we thought that George and I might just sit down together and visit a little bit about building codes. What do they mean? Where do they come from? How do they apply?
Well, a code is an ordinance or a law that requires the person who's building a home to follow this prescribed outline of what should or should not be done, whether it's structural, plumbing, electrical, or mechanical. The International Code Council has a 3-year cycle for adopting building codes. There are the residential building code for all the commercial work, there's a national electrical code, there's the international plumbing code, there's a private sewage disposal code, and on and on. There's about 7 or 8 different codes that are broken out for other than the residential. Residential has its own separate code that has everything in it. And those are done every 3 years nationally, and then it's up to the local jurisdictions. In some parts of the country, states adopt the code. In other parts, like we are in Kansas and Missouri, where there's home rule, we adopt the codes by each local jurisdiction or city. And in our part of the country, it's traditionally been every 6 years rather than every 3 years, because it's a big learning process to get all of the codes adopted and understood by both the builders and the architects and the engineers, as well as the code officials and the inspectors who are out in the field. Building codes are adopted by each city or county within our metropolitan area, and all of those cities or counties has a code enforcement officer or a department that does it. You take the biggest city like Kansas City or Overland Park, they have probably 50 to 100 people in their planning and development department that process development requirements, that developers will submit their plans for a subdivision that goes through their planning department. And then, so if I'm a builder, I submit my plans. Usually they're done by an architect, or I might have drawn a sketch of it to start with, and then the architect finished it, reviewed by an engineer to be sure it's structurally right, and then submitted to the city, and they review the plans, they check it for code compliance. If it meets the requirements, they approve it, and then I can start building the house. I'll use the example of earthquakes. We don't have earthquake problems in this part of the country, although if you go to Memphis, Tennessee, or the West Coast, earthquakes are a very big thing, and there are very specific requirements depending upon the severity of the earthquake requirements in those areas. But that might not cover exactly what's needed because of a particular circumstance that might exist in one geographic area versus another. So the model codes are there for either a state or a municipality to adopt or amend to meet their own requirements. The model codes give you a basic guideline or an outline of what you should do, and then the local jurisdiction can modify and adjust it. And of course, as home builders, we're involved because we're concerned with what's put in the code is reasonable. We are strongly in favor of good, solid codes that are enforced uniformly so that a homeowner can feel comfortable in buying a house to know that it's a safe home to live in. But codes are only a guideline or a standard. Many builders do much more than codes and have for many years. The building codes have been written and they've been increased in requirements in all areas, which are good, but at some point we price the homeowner, our consumer, out of the market, and that's not good. If we price people in service sector, school teachers, police, fire personnel, City of Kansas City requires their employees to live within the city limits of Kansas City, Missouri. If we price them out, that means either we got to give them a raise so they can afford that house, or they're going to have to live in substandard or not as efficient housing. That's the reason builders are concerned with adopting reasonable codes, but not something that will continue to price the people out of the market. So it is very important for we as home builders to be involved in the code process in each city so that that city does not adopt something that will cause people to not be able to afford to live in that home and to move away. Inspections are done by each city on different schedules. Most of them have several requirements for inspections. The first one they usually have is a foundation inspection to see that you've dug the footers correctly. That's the concrete that's carrying the weight of the house, that they're the proper size, the proper depth, and they're on good load-bearing soil. Some of them have what they call a pre-backfill inspection, where they look to see that you've damp-proofed or waterproofed the outside of the foundation so water won't get in, that you've got proper drainage tile around it, and that you've done your plumbing ground rough. That's the plumbing drain lines below the foundation where you're going to put the basement floor. Then you build the house. You got the framework of the house up. You've got the roof on it. You've got your mechanical trade that's put in your heating and cooling system. You've got your electrician and your plumber who have put in their piping and their electrical wires and the boxes. At that point, they do an inspection, which we call a rough-in inspection or a concealment inspection, to be sure all these things are done properly. The inspector looks to be sure that the sewer lines are slanted so that they drain correctly, that the electrical wires are properly installed, that they're all bonded. They look at the structural aspects, whether the load carrying capabilities from the roof carry all the way down to the foundation, whether the HVAC system is sized correctly for each room in the house. And if that passes, then you're ready to insulate the house. Some cities do an insulation inspection to see that you've properly installed the insulation. Others rely upon a third party that the builder is hired to certify that. Then you come in, you drywall the house, you finish it, and the city comes back and does a final inspection for issuing a certificate of occupancy. At that point, they look to be sure your locks are properly installed, that cabinets are secure, electrical outlets have been properly installed and are grounded correctly. Typically, there's not much they look at HVAC other than you probably didn't have the air conditioning unit set time, so they'll inspect that to be sure you got the right size breaker for the size of the air conditioning requirements. They look for simple things like you have the address on the house in certain size. In most cities, we have a security ordinance, so they look to see if you've installed the proper kind of deadbolts, you have the proper lighting outside the doors for security. And if all those things pass, then you get a certificate of occupancy, so now you can sell the house to a homeowner. These codes are now online, where you can go to the ICC and the public can look at the code. You can't print a copy of it, but you can look at the sections of the code, whether it's plumbing or electrical or structural aspects of the house.